Good evening and welcome to another podcast by Softlogic Stockbrokers. Today we are speaking to CIC, which is one of the largest companies when you're looking at the fertilizer market in Sri Lanka. And quite interestingly, it's not just fertilizer. When it comes to the agri side, the poultry, healthcare, and also some of the industrial chemicals, it is very much a major conglomerate in the market. Now, previously, we've also had multiple discussions with CIC, and one of the interesting things is how dynamic the company has been and how it has had to face various changes in the local landscape amidst a lot of changes also happening globally. Now, in this process, a couple of the things that we would like to look at is naturally by each of the business segments. And I would like to take it actually in that order. I think we'd begin with crop solutions, and then we'd move on to poultry. We would move on to pharmaceuticals, and then some of the other smaller segments as well. So just to begin us, I think without Aroshan, I'll give you all the liberties of deciding who would prefer to answer. First is when we look at the fertilizer landscape in Sri Lanka. We have seen a major shift happening. We've seen the government stepping out to a great extent. We've seen prices fluctuating very significantly over the past couple of years, and we've seen the market settling down to some extent. In that, we also see a bit more competition now. How has this landscape changed, and where do you see the current position of CS?
Okay, thank you, Renal. Thank you for having us. That currently is the position, and you have to take into cognizance how this was with the subsidy and all that. Certain aspects, when it was given on subsidy basis, I believe what is given free sometimes it's not valued. So whilst the overall fertilizer volumes were exceedingly high, the usage was not judicious. You had a lot of wastage going up. Then with the crisis and the subsidy being taken out, you had price points going up, especially during the crisis point. You had urea, especially if you take as an example, coming at 30,000, 25,000, and now it has come down relative. But still you have to understand at the farmer level, what he got at 1,005, he's still paying about 6-7 times more to around 8,000 to 9,000 level. So rising production costs due to the depreciation of the Sri Lankan rupee and higher labor expenses for tea and other field crops. The harvesting cost for farmers has been a significant element in reducing the profitability. So in that context, and as you rightly said, with increased competition, because anyone can come into this segment, in the short term, we are looking at more on the cost leadership aspects, especially in terms of safeguarding the market share and hence sustaining a market leadership position. Most agricultural crops have actually resulted in lower yields coming through, and that's been seen in the last few years. There's a lot of potential. So one of the key aspects is actually increasing your productivity. How do we go about in terms of increasing productivity and moving away from subsistence farming to more on the commercial farming side, to make it more impactful in that sense, and then offsetting the input costs and improving profitability. So there we are looking at in the medium to long term in terms of differentiation. Differentiation in terms of the efficacy, quality, the inputs and the protection inputs which we have as a significant input provider, more focused differentiation strategy, and crop specific formulations, meaning the blends rather than plain vanilla straight fertilizer in that sense. So one of the key aspects is, I think over the years we have conducted quite a bit of research and development, and that's something which we pride on in the R&D ability, and also reaching out to our principals of partners whom we have had over long periods to leverage the best in class in terms of their R&D and that knowledge sharing. So that has helped us to actually differentiate from some of the others. And this is a key element where we are looking at in terms of developing production packages which can improve cultural productivity and the nutritional management aspects, both considering chemical and the organic elements as well. To, I mean, end of the day, to inculcate better farming practices, generally accepted good agriculture agronomy practices to enhance the productivity and thereby the profitability of the farm.
And I also understand that there are multiple initiatives you have taken to get some of these products was accepted by the farmers. How has progress been on some of these initiatives, and what would you see would be the requirement going forward?
I think some of the key initiatives which the agri cluster has done, if I may elaborate one or two things, has been the Dallakin Venasak program that is targeting the tea fields and especially looking at three districts, Ratnapura, Gaul and Mahatara. That is a PPP, and I may add another P to that because it's public, private, and people related. Sorry, triple P in that sense. So working with the TRI, the TSH, the Tea Research Institute, the tea smallholders, and where we have created farmer clusters, farmer leads in that sense, and working with a whole host of farmers where we wanted to pilot this up. The special blends and focus strategies in terms of differentiating agronomy advice, just to understand the data in terms of how the productivity would improve. And today we have a baseline, we have the data. And one of the things that came out from that Dallak Invenasak program was that on average, the tea yield in these areas with the farmer clusters in what we worked out actually improved to about 25 to 26%. There were those yields which went above 30% also, but on average it was 26, so which is tremendous. I mean, that's something where I think as a country we should be proud of if we can broad base this. Now it's an element of working in other districts and seeing how we can broad base and really be impactful in that sense. Because if you take as a country, our tea crop has come down from 300 million kilos, I think probably to around 250 to 260 million kilos. So these are areas where we can really work with the people that matter, the farmers, and see how the improvement can come. The other element which we are looking at in terms of enhancing the key productivity elements is in rice, corn, coconut, onion, and potato. So there are various programs, but another element we are working is something called Vadipura Gediak, additional coconut, working with Tea Research Institute and the Coconut Cultivation Board. There we are looking at formulating hybrid seeds in improving the productivity. If you take some data points, average, if you take per annum, uh, it's about 40 metric tons, 40 nuts per tree, 45 to 50 nuts per tree. In India, certain types of trees and all that, you get about 100 to 120 nuts per tree. I mean, let's not look at 100, but if we can increase this 40, the yield to about 60 or 70, I mean, that's significant in itself, because you find even exporters not having nuts today. Most of it is domestically consumed. If you take the 3 billion odd nuts which come out. So again, these are specific programs trying to develop hybrid coconut seedlings and all that, where we can improve the productivity, the volume coming out of it, inculcated with the entire package, the bundle offering from agronomy advisory to the inputs which go in. And the other one is a Ran Sarupala initiative that's with the paddy, the rice sector, with the agriculture department. The main goal, as I said, is improving productivity and promoting environmentally friendly, efficient agricultural inputs through cluster activities and all that. Where again, looking at class 3, class 4 inputs which go in. Definition of class 3, class 4 under WHO is where least toxicity. So we are very mindful of environmental toxicity elements as well, being sustainable in that sense as a nation. So it's an overall sort of bundled offering, and where we offer even laboratory services for farmers to test their soil, water, and so on. So that's in a broad sense some of the specific aspects which we are looking at, and in major sort of related areas to improve productivity.
So I think the point you mentioned was quite interesting, and that leads me to another question of mine, which is this something that we can potentially only see for coconut, or are there other industries like this that also can see this kind of a yield improvement if they have the right seedlings, the right fertilizer, the right products?
Yes, definitely. Other areas in terms of even we have a hybrid seed locally developed with the department, with the government, getting some of their genetics and material. And in fact, that's a direct import substitution as well because we rely so much on imported seeds coming through. So the short answer is yes, we can look at other crops, which we are looking at, even sugarcane, for instance, to improve the overall productivity of that, and that's to do with the type of fertilizer, the slow release, granular, next generation fertilizer. So that's a key element in that.
I think a lot of development can be made if you take the best agriculture practices you see in smaller countries like Netherlands, Israel, and all that. And then we can't be an exception to that. But today the problem that we have is that we can't bring capital to the farmland because most of the farmland are not owned by the farmers; they are owned by the government. So government now has to look at that aspect as well so that capital can be brought in and then the private level so that it will add another leg of efficiency and the productivity improvement. So before that what we are trying to do is that we are looking at the key economic growth sectors in agriculture and disseminate our knowledge in terms of agriculture best practices and inputs so that they can do whatever they can in the absence of mechanization to the level it is required. And this will continue further. But it is the best time for us to develop it because we are recovering as an economy and there's a lot of interest around Sri Lanka in terms of productivity improvement. So I think this is something with a sustainability and very impactful activity that we are carrying out. As you said, the potential is there, the same thing to be replicated in other sectors of crop, and the potential is very high. We are just scratching the surface here.
So talking about actually high growth sectors, we also see that another thing that you all have looked at is actually these hybrid chili seeds. And as what I understand, you all have actually sent consignments to Bangladesh as well. How has the response of that been, and how much do you see the global potential for this coming in? Because I think spices, chilies, especially in a lot of food varieties, is something that is growing globally in popularity. So how would you see we might be able to approach some of these sectors?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because if you look at in terms of the verticals, you find agri input market which has become saturated to an extent, even with differentiated sort of brands coming. So one of the key elements is the growth of the seed, developing hybrid seeds. We've already developed in five major crops from corn, chili, to okra, brinjal, and so on. We did an initial export order to Bangladesh and also looking at India and Nepal. Early days, I think there's tremendous potential because one of the elements here, in a very short sense, is that Sri Lanka being 65,000 odd square kilometers, being an island, having large tracts of contiguous land is an issue. And to be impactful in seed development, you need to have large tracts of land. So in some of the regional countries, there are various zones and possibility of really scaling up in terms of seed development. But it's a long-term thing because you have to overcome regulatory elements. I mean, climatic in terms of regional aspects, we are more or less similar in certain things. But there's a lot of potential on the knowledge sharing, as I said, on research and development, working closely even with our partners, as I was saying earlier. So it's more long-term initiative because today two difficult things are having water and having people to man farms. You know what it was like after the crisis and all that with the migration. So in that backdrop, you have to look out. You have to go outside your comfort zone and look at initiatives like this. Whilst with the knowledge that you have from the scientists, you take it out, you export that out, and look at large tracts of lands in those countries.
It's a more, what I would say is that this is more a learning curve that we have started than a commercial move, because we are trying to see how our expertise are going to be relevant in the region, right? So this may be the first step to the learning curve, and then we have a long way to travel before it is getting commercialized and we are looking at any revenues out of it. Fortunately, we have good partners who are willing to work with us, and all these countries, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the regionally bigger countries serving for about almost 2 billion population, they are exposed to seasons, whereas Sri Lanka is not. So we found out that somewhere we can be of at least some relevance. So we are trying to figuring it out. We'll keep you posted on that.
It's actually the traction is gaining as momentum. You're absolutely right. I think with the migrations, there are what we call ethnic shops in some of these countries, and similar to some of the other consumer brands, we are very much in some of those ethnic shops. If you take North America, Canada, and all that, rice exports are predominantly there on the east coast of US and also Australia. We have a new distributor and we're trying to gain traction there. Whilst there is some sort of distribution and presence in ethnic shops, I think to really be impactful, you need to go deeper into the retail space, and that's where partnerships are needed to look at wholesale, the modern trade in those countries, because we feel we have a portfolio. If you take even Link Natural, Link Samahan is well known. It's a 30 plus year brand, right? And it's predominantly available from Czech Republic going to the EU to Japan, through Costco wholesale in Australia, in US, and so on. But it's not only Samhan. There's another much bigger portfolio where we need to really develop that brand, create the brand awareness, work with partners, do ground level initiatives, and get that significant retail impact rather than merely looking at distribution in that sense.
So that is also quite interesting. And I suppose just like we would be exporting there's also the imports that we face. I think especially again looking at, let's say, some of the looking at the agri sector in particular, basmati rice imports is also something we're facing now, and not just imports. You're seeing various discounts being offered. You're seeing larger packs coming into the market. How is this also affecting your local demand for some of your rice varieties?
So if you remember, I think towards the latter part of 2024, the government briefly liberalized rice imports, and through that we found long grain rice, which is similar to our sort of tier 2 basmati coming in. Whilst yes, that competition is there, but that's a temporary thing because they opened it, and at the moment it's no longer enforced. But the key element for us is where we look at a niche segment, be it health rice. I think that's the key, because where the glycemic GI rice, where the glycemic index in normal rice is about, let's say, 60-70%. But our scientists have developed that health rice variant, the glycemic index varies from 41-42% up to 50%. And when you take South Asia alone, you have, Viraj will know the statistics because being heading the pharma side of it, 1 in 4 is afflicted with sugar related in NCD related aspects. So I mean, this is right up their street in that sense. The low GI variant. So there's a lot of potential. And as the world is also moving, my view towards more wellness, looking at the sustainability angle, I think there's a lot of potential on the health side. So whilst, I mean, there are the policy related aspects, the short term challenges which we may face, the key is differentiating on the health rise rather than the traditional portfolio. And we see a lot of potential there, both locally, where we need to really have a presence in GT, whilst we have in modern trade and Horeca channels, and that too is growing with tourism. But I think area to really expand is on the the income strata, which improves, and thereby they're able to sort of afford even the health variant going forward, and looking at broad exports for the health rise.
And I think that's a very valid point, because being a little more health conscious is definitely something that is evolving and improving. I can probably attest that I too am a customer of the low GI rice. So I think just looking at some of the nutritional facts on it, I think it does bring a compelling argument. So I think that is just a broader look at crop solutions and agri. But before we move out of a very important conversation we need to have is also in terms of input prices. Specifically, when you look at the production of fertilizer, you have urea, you have nitrogen being the core element, and natural gas being required to extract it. Now, historically, with some of the trends we've seen there being a good correlation between natural gas prices, urea prices. How is the market right now, and where would you see it going? As I think, as we were just discussing earlier, also commodities are starting to go up. How do you see this market and the future of it being?
So on the conventional side, as we were discussing earlier as well, and I would allude to even a World Bank report, I think the fertilizer prices or the commodity, and we can see that in some of the, for instance, if you take urea, MOP, SOP, the basic plain vanilla sort of straight fertilizer side. Whilst, I mean, this is an element, I think the key thing is where we look at new generation fertilizer, plant nutrients, which are more efficient. I think that's a key, and also working on the blends rather than the straight. This way you balance it out, and you look at the overall sort of organo-mineral aspects. So as a strategy, we are trying to promote both chemical and organic, and inventing the type of hybrid fertilizers that include these elements. Because at the end of the day, the plant needs nutrition in some manner or form, and how it gets there, and how you reduce wastage, and how it gets washed away is one of the key aspects. So the discussion can happen in so many angles, not only looking at the straight conventional fertilizer. And there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, if you take other than field crops, if you take protected agriculture, greenhousing, the drip irrigation, fertigation, there are so many elements where you can improve productivity.
So that's why these initiatives that we have been carrying out, like Dalla King Vanessa, Panipura, are very important because we are in an open economy. So these raw material prices, the absolute increase in raw material prices as well as depreciating rupee can have an impact on cost of production, cost of cultivation. So no way that we can overcome it except for improving the productivity. So productivity is very important in terms of thinking about how we cultivate, how we apply the inputs, how we harvest, how we transport, and how we mechanize. So all these aspects are very important. So we have started at disseminating the knowledge as well as training them on the application of the inputs. That is what we can do as of now. So when they are mastering that, they will get into the next stage, mechanizing, etc., the post harvesting and all of that. So this is very important, and productivity is the main driver as a corporate player that we can differentiate ourselves from others. So that's why even in Naroshan's earlier explanation, he mentioned that we are a focused differentiator in these aspects. And we continue to do so. There are so many challenges. Straight fertilizer pricing is coming down, margins are shrinking. But we keep on educating because we had an understanding that at certain point in time, these pressures will come and compel us to be more competitive, more productive, more economically viable in agriculture practices.
And that kind of leads me to another question, which again, I'm not sure if this is something you might even be able to answer, but taking people through that entire journey of also educating them, does that also help in making them, or at least giving you a higher chance of taking them on as a loyal customer? Do the smaller farmers look at what the big players are doing, or does this really does this make a major impact? How does that work, if that is something you can answer?
No, I think, yeah, adding to what Viraj said, I think the journey with smaller farmers is how do you make them a bigger farmer? So, a smaller farmer, how do you make it an SME type of thing and make him understand that he can get there? See, agriculture in this country, my view is if you're doing it for poverty alleviation, then it's a difficult. But if agriculture, if you're really looking to do to as a business model and wanting to expand, and thereafter, as Viraj has highlighted, expanding that order book beyond the shores of Sri Lanka, I think that's where you need to focus on. If it's poverty alleviation, there are other programs like Ask for Suman, if you want, making sure that cash goes out and you bring them out from that bucket to the other the commercial farming bucket. So that's a key thing. But in that journey, we may come across both sides, but you need to have that conversation and make sure who are the pseudo farmers and who are the real farmers. And those real farmers, you take them on that journey, what Viraj has highlighted, step by step initially, because you can't from day one make them an exporter. That doesn't work. And it's a mindset change, making them understand the benefits of productivity, using the proper sort of fertilizer at the correct time, the protocols, what you do. So it's a journey, hand holding. So that's where I think the structure that we have and
So
our
actually,
teams who have very
that
strong domain knowledge, I think that's a
it's
key
quite interesting
attribute
because I think
across the
another
island.
thing you also
The
mentioned, I
other
think, a little bit
element
about
when you're working
labor and
on
migration.
that
Now,
is,
along with also labor and
I think
migration,
this is
we
a key
also
thing
have
where
built ourselves a
proof
bit
in the
of
pudding is
a
in eating.
expat
End
community
of the day. So even with those
overseas.
farmers, if you can do a trial plot
How is there any demand
with
coming from them,
what
or
we
how is the
propagate,
demand
with the
from
inputs,
them or
with
those
the
regions
advice,
for, let's say,
and the
some of
farmers themselves
CIC's
can see the
products? I think
results,
especially when you're
day,
looking at,
and
let's
how
say,
that
some
impacts
rice
their PNL, how
varieties
they
that
get
you all
more
had,
profitability through
whether it is
productivity.
even the low
It's not
GI
straight
rice,
away doing on the field,
purple
but
rice,
a
things
pilot
like that.
project, maybe one
How
season
has
in
the
yellow,
traction
then
for
looking
that
at.
been? Is it just
So it's
Sri
a journey.
Lanka?
It's a
Has it
long-term
been able
journey.
to go beyond
It's
that?
how
And
you
so
look
how
at
has
it. I think
the
what we
traction?
need to enable is that, nothing like seeing future differently. Because a lot of examples are there in the world. You take a country like Netherlands, a similar size in terms of population to Sri Lanka, much smaller in terms of area, right? But exports about 150 billion dollars to mostly to US in terms of agricultural produce. So agriculture is very much advanced. So it's not about the amount of people, amount of the land that you have, but how you do what you do very efficiently and effectively. So that's what we are trying to do. This will be a journey again, right? We understand that we have to have a lot of compromises in achieving our outcome, but we are keeping our small steps into the path and watching the progress.
And I think that is fantastic. I think that is what we can hope both as a country, and also definitely for CIC as well. So moving on to actually livestock. Now, just like fertilizer, livestock also has been going through multiple changes. You saw a season where maize imports was quite difficult. You saw a season where you had price restrictions, you had price ceilings on poultry. Uh, Eggs, you saw a similar situation happening. So, with all of these changes, if I can just ask it very simply, where do we stand now? And reasonably going forward, what could the future look like for poultry and eggs?
No, you're right. I think we have seen these cyclical aspects in poultry and eggs. And if I may add the backward part of it, the feed industry. And one of the key things, obviously, your disposable income has to be at a certain level. Although chicken is still the cheapest form of protein relative to some of the others, we saw somewhat of a dip in terms of the spending pattern on these, and that brought about significant stocks in the industry. But then, what do you do with poultry and it's a biological thing. It's not like a machine. You can't press a button and it doesn't stop overnight. So this cycle takes a bit of time. And today we see, because everyone has cut down on production, some of the the small timers have actually moved away. So although it's a fragmented space, you see there is traction and there is growth happening, albeit at a lower sort of bandwidth. But within that bandwidth, we can see there's potential and there's growth. And that's seen even in consumption patterns through modern trade, through the live birds sale, and so on. And a key factor to improve this has been some of the feed prices, although it keeps fluctuating. Um, Corn is a significant input into this. If you take feed as a percentage of revenue, it's more than 50, and out of that, corn is also quite significant. And the imported corn was at a fairly low price vis-a-vis the local manufacturers corn. So it's a case of balancing, getting into long-term contracts, judiciously purchasing when it comes to the spot. So one of the key elements is having good management who understand the nuances and who understand how this curve is going to go, be it on poultry, be it on eggs or whatever, and the judicious purchasing of the input. So I think that's a key thing, where that's what differentiates the sort of the margins in that sense. But just in a general sense, there are seasonality aspects from April Aurudu to Christmas season, third quarter which are coming. The improvement in Horeca, I believe it should be sustained over the year, especially with tourism. And Horeca channel is, I think, a key element. And where you work with maybe larger institutions in Horeca, where you cater to their needs. I mean, similar to agriculture, you differentiate through elements of value addition and customized sort of packages in that sense.
Because I think as you correctly mentioned, I think Horeca is definitely something that is moving forward. But I think along with just the crisis that we saw, I think we are also seeing improvements coming in terms of disposable income, improvements coming in terms of real income. If you look at private, public sector, real wages, they're starting to see an adjustment now, even compared to the inflationary impacts. So I believe these also should help in terms of some of those demand conditions. Okay?
Definitely, it should. I mean, you will know
Commodities
better
are
in
going
terms of
to
the credit
go up.
growth last 6 months. Logically, this needs to get translated somewhere through businesses, ultimately through salaries and all that. We've all gone through tough times. I mean, we are still paying 36% tax. But that mindset has also looked at it, the discretionary spend aspect, where people really panicked and got down, and maybe if they bought one chicken once in 7 days, then it became one chicken once in 14 days. But now again, it's coming back to some sort of a reasonable cycle in that sense.
And again, in terms of, I think you already slightly mentioned about the corn side, but if you were to look at, let's say, a more deeper corporate strategy as to how you would be managing those cost fluctuations, now CIC also is probably has a bit more backward integration than maybe some of your other peers. How much of a role does that play, and how much does that support you all in terms of maintaining your margins or your profitability whilst these other market conditions are changing?
In terms of the inputs,
In terms of the
inputs and all that. So it's a culmination of various things. We have to look at it proactively, not react whether the corn price is now being low or being high and then try to react on that. So what we do is two aspects. One is long-term contracts with some of our partners, And then looking at even alternative material. Because when you do a feed formulation, let's say for dairy sector, if it's a concentrate formulation, it's the nutritional element. So there are many inputs that can go in, and you can have alternate inputs going in based on the price points and so on. So that's a key element, and that is also a derivative of the knowledge of the management that which sits there. Understanding how do you get the best formulation in terms of certain nutritional aspects. What are the other alternate inputs which go in? So corn is one element, but there is soybean meal, there is local ingredients which you can source. So it's a culmination of all those elements which help.
And again, in terms of prices, what has, I think we've also seen a new government now coming in. What has their stance been in terms of price controls in this field? Is that something you can comment on? Am I putting you in the deep end by asking you this? Or is it?
I mean, price controls on certain industries, whichever government, the discussion takes place, and then sometimes it goes up. So I think these are things, I don't know whether the industry needs to get too excited about it. But one of the key elements is the overall sort of policy framework. Uh, End of the day, if you take chicken, which is at 1,150, now it comes down with, like, say, various promotional offers, it may go at even 850, 890, or 900. So whilst that is happening at the local level, I'm a firm believer, end of the day, demand supply comes into play, market forces in that sense. But I think that's one element. But the key element from a government perspective is the policy framework. How do we have consistent policy on livestock, and how do we become more, how do we become more competitive in the export zone? I think that's one of the, again, being an island, without looking too inwardly on this, we got to see how competitive we could be in terms of regional exports. That's being discussed at the moment as an industry, but I don't see very much happening there, because ultimately you have to have comparable advantage, right, when you're exporting. So that's where the policy factors, I would say, where even it's not a case of working against government or anything like that. Whoever who's there, I think it's collectively as industry and government working together to ensure there's consistent policy, meaningful policy, which are relevant in today's times, and looking at the regional aspects to see how we can be more competitive in our exports.
Alignment of priorities are very, very important here, because poultry, especially chicken, is a critical food item in the country. So pricing is very important. That price depends on the raw material prices, especially corn. So local corn is anyway expensive than the imported corn. So government need prices to be coming down. Government expect our players to be competitive regionally and the global markets. So we need to align these things. As Saroshan said, we believe in, allowing market forces to function freely, so that it will bring good prices, it will bring good quality, wealth creation for the organization, good pricing for the consumers. So I think this is where we need to focus on, rather than focusing extremely on the price control, because wherever you are heavily focusing on price control, it will end up in a disaster. So this is something I think both industry and state both have the responsibility, to discuss between each other, understand the priority, and develop the policy framework accordingly.
Thank you. I know I really put you all into the deep end with the question, but on a coming back, I think if you can look at just something more specific to CIC, I think it was omega-3 golden yolks. I think that has been a product that has done quite well. You're looking at, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, about 100,000 in terms of monthly sales. Now, as a slightly premium product, how does the demand for something like that stack up? Is in a market that is recovering from a crisis, is the demand actually picking up quite well? What do you all expect that to be?
Now, again, I think similar to our low GI price strategy, and in terms of efficacy of our product portfolio, so we are consciously playing this at a premium. and especially with the feed nutritional sort of formulations which go into the feed, with the omega-3 sort of configuration of that. You're right, we do about 100,000. In fact, I think last month around 140,000. So we are trying to double from 100 to 200,000 by December. So we would play in that premium segment because we feel that wellness, even a family unit, knowing that the quality is guaranteed in that sense. I think that's a key element in terms of differentiation. And from the health perspective, you have eggs and you have eggs, right? But from a health variant, like with enriched with omega-3, I think this stands out. And so we are confident that this segment, there'll be trajectory growth, especially from the HoReCa, from improvements in disposable income levels and all that. Per capita consumption currently is around 135, if I'm not mistaken. So this should improve going forward.
Right. And that also leads me to a question, I think, talking about new segments. I think you have also expanded into the cheese market as well. Again, can I have some thoughts behind again the shift into that and potentially some of the expectations you all have for that segment too?
On the dairy segment,
Yes.
expansion into cheese. Yeah. So initially, I mean, when dairy started, I think Viraj was there during that period. He was also highlighting that the market at that time, everyone was looking at yogurt, and there was tremendous growth in yogurt, or potential opportunity in yogurt some years back. Come fast forward to today, it's a red ocean on the yogurt space. So we started with yogurt, albeit with a limited product portfolio. We had the drinking yogurt and the set yogurt, the jelly type of yogurt. But key element is, I mean, limited product portfolio in today's consumerism is not going to really take you drive scale, and that's one of the key things we need to drive. We need to have revenue drivers which bring in the volumes. So cheese was a natural extension, and especially during the crisis where they banned imported cheese, where some of the local manufacturers of local cheese got good traction. Feel there's opportunity to arbitrage on that, and especially again trying to create a niche. I think through the Maya partnership, we have seen good traction on the mozzarella side of it, again on the HoReCa side. So we feel there is good traction, and especially looking at the curd portfolio as well. We are looking at some franchise operation to improve the curd volumes. So yes, we are in a limited sort of product portfolio, but within that, we are trying to see how we can monetize and expand the revenue drivers.
Thank you. So actually moving from that, I think I'd like to go completely into a new segment, which is health and personal care. Now, you briefly touched on Link before this as well. Now, we've seen a very significant growth coming in terms of the export volumes for Link. We've seen a 130% growth, if I am not mistaken. What is the expansion strategy there? Because clearly there is a strategy and clearly it's working. So would you be able to share a bit more light as to how that has been and what the future might be there?
Yeah, this year, as far I think 138% export growth was largely driven by Link Samahan. So key markets contributing to this growth were Europe, US, India, Russia, and Japan. With Europe, USA, and Russia actually surpassing expectations. This broadly because certain orders were preponed, as you know, but the whole globe was going through with tariff-related aspects on advanced shipments and all that. So that benefited, but we are confident that there would be some degree of sustainability in the next few months as well. The export strategy, we've targeted Europe and USA, Japan, focusing more on the market penetration and increased sort of consumption through various market development activities, brand building, and consumer engagement. Those are in a broad sense. Again, notable success was seen in the Czech Republic and UK, where they have looked at the effectiveness of some of the strategies and expanding Samahan's global recognition. I think the key thing, because the product has been there for a while. I mean, today actually I met someone from overseas, and you know, although we're a listed entity, they were not aware of CIC, but they knew somehow the product. So that's a powerful sort of sentiment where a product of a subsidiary was well known, I think, across the. So there are a lot of things where we can do to expand that footprint, and perhaps not only looking at plain vanilla distribution, working with partners, but looking at the next stage where you do sort of the local formulation. There's a lot of potential. I mean, you hear about other brands going in, because we need to be have deeper entrenchment in those markets. So whilst these things would bring in certain volume, but I think we have to look at the next stage of gaining deeper sort of entrenchment.
That's definitely something very encouraging to hear. It's good to see that our local products are being known and being used, I think across the world. But taking a slight step into something closer to home, if you look at just some of CIC's contributions to the local market, we also see you're looking at the fixed dose combinations. And seems that you would most likely have a bit of a first mover advantage there too. What are the plans in the pipeline for this in terms of any new product launches, and how do you plan to maintain this edge that you're having?
So fixed dose combination is clinically proven in the world now. That's the way to go. One is the compliance, because drug dosing is becoming more day and day, or more day by day. Like it may be like if you are under any chronic disease, it may be 3 or 4 drugs that you need to go under, and at times you may run out of stock for one, and it's highly likely that you will miss it for a couple of days. So compliance is very important, key part of treating any chronic disease. And at the same time, pricing, right? So these are the things which were looked at and improved clinical outcome. These are the 3 things which was looked at in developing these fixed dose combinations, and it was proven that when you are taking it together, you get more control, and these are clinically proven results. And at the same time, you can get some economic advantage also in terms of pricing, because it's the same packaging material that would go in, so that patient will get some advantage. So we saw this opportunity 3 years back. So we had to deal with the local regulator, and local regulator took it very positively. So with our partners, we made the first move to the market in terms of launching these fixed dose combination products. We have introduced about 8 fixed dose combination products as of now. All are into chronic care, and in all the stories, we enter to the market first, and first 2 or 3 brand is under our umbrella. So that's a significant advantage, not commercially, as well as changing how chronic care disease treatment is looked at in the market. So we are more recognized as an opinion leader with the KOLs, with the chemists, with the patients, because this makes their life easier. So this is the trend that we have brought into Sri Lanka, and we are going to build on that further as well. Because when you look at the WHO Essential Medicine list also, which was recently published, they have gone to the extent of recognizing the fixed dose combinations into that. Looking at the results, the clinical outcomes that they have seen, so they have gone to that extent. Means this is going to be the trend, and then we are happy that we made the first mover initiative to the market. It can be an advantage not only for us, but to the whole market, whole industry, whole patient community, because this a winning strategy, global winning strategy, taken down to the Sri Lankan context.
And again, I know I'm probably putting you in a slightly tough spot by asking you this question, but how have been the response in terms of prescriptions been like? Has there been any pushback on it, or have doctors been more than comfortable to opt for this since it is available and accepted at a global level?
It's again a learning curve to start with,
Right.
but the adoption rate in Sri Lanka is very amazing. Well, if you take an area like diabetes, there are a lot of drugs coming out, and it's coming faster, right? And the life cycle of drugs are getting very, very shorter. Previously, a drug invention used to remain for about 20, 30, 40 years. You have some time tested drug treating diabetes, but there are some drugs, they just come, remain in the peak for some time, and then goes off because the new generation comes in. So with this, most of the KOLs in Sri Lanka, key opinion leaders, the doctors, healthcare professionals in Sri Lanka, they are used to it. They have the information at their fingertips, and for their studies, they travel abroad. So with that, we don't see any problem in adoption. But any new thing or something which is new introduced to the market has its own learning curve, but what we see is that this learning curve is faster. Even the response that we are getting from our partners is that the learning curve is much faster than what they saw in their own countries. So that's an encouraging sign.
That is definitely very encouraging to hear, because I guess even as just complete layman means we're getting the best treatment. So yes, definitely something quite encouraging. But again, when it comes to dealing with the local healthcare segment, I think you also deal with, uh, unfortunately, some delayed payments, especially in terms of some of the government contracts that you all are having. How has this been? Has there been repayments coming in as a company? Would you be looking to reduce your dependence on some of these government contracts? How has it been?
It's a relative situation, I would say. Payments are getting better, that's the best part of it. But there is a serious backlog that need to be sorted out. And then there are some issues the industry is facing. But uh, good part that we see is, it's getting better. Payments are coming, getting expedited. So let's live with the hope because things are getting better. And industry also getting involved in sorting out these matters. But there's a significant amount of delayed payment to the industry that the industry is dealing with, and the government has to sort it out fast.
Interesting. So I think that brings us to an end of the health and personal care space, and I have just two very brief questions on the industrial solution side of things before we wrap up. So first is, we see that rubber and latex exports to Europe especially have been on the rise. Uh, what has been the company's strategy to capitalize on this, and what are some of CIC's targets for the years to come?
You're right, it has been on the rise, and we target the exporters from here. So we are an indirect sort of exporter in that sense. And one aspect is to expand the supplier base to introduce new sort of competitive products to the industry. Elements like carbon, like 4-grade precipitated silica, anti-cating silica for home care, synthetic rubber, rubber accelerators. So it's like broad basing the product portfolio and ensuring the quality and the price points are competitive in catering to this.
And when I think apart from that, I think especially when you're looking at Chemonex, there's also a bit of an expansion into engineering tools. Uh, Again, just for us to get an idea, what is the market size like in that segment that you're looking at, and what is your penetration strategy over there?
So Chemonex as a corporate, it's more boutique corporation,
Right.
and we have a portfolio which is, I would say, somewhat generic. So consciously, we're moving from that to more proprietary, sort of differentiated elements, and specifically on the metal sort of cutting tools and all that. There are sort of there is one particular supplier which we have looked at new segments, especially on measuring tools, bending tools, and cutting tools. It's on these PLCs, where you get the tools which are needed for that. I would reckon, I would hazard a guess, maybe around 1 billion, the entire market size. And whilst it's a fairly new segment, most people don't talk about it. I think it's an interesting segment because I think one of the key elements in improving our export portfolio is being competitive on the manufacturing industrial side of it. And I think there are a lot of policy related aspects also which are coming on that. So we would be a key input provider in that sense. So we see there is potential there in an overall sense, especially on the metal cutting side of things.
A lot of potential and a lot of potential for multiple segments. I think we finished the conversation on each one of these segments, really exploring the fact that there is so much more to grow, to expand, and to look at even in the future. So thank you, sir, for your knowledge and your inputs for this program. I think it was very insightful and it's very encouraging to see the growth that we're seeing in all of these various different markets, segments where you all have entered into newly, segments that are growing, and segments that you all are just doing a bit of research and development and just dipping your toes in, because it definitely makes it quite encouraging for the future. And I'm sure our audience too had a lot to learn from this program. So thank you once again, and thank you to our audience for viewing, and we hope to catch you at our next podcast. Thank you and good evening.